Open your fridge and there's a good chance it's in there. Milk, one of the most ordinary things in the modern world. On cereal, in coffee, handed to children as the most natural food imaginable. So here's a question that sounds simple and isn't. When did humans start drinking milk? You might picture it going back almost forever. Cavemen and cows, somewhere in the midst of prehistory. And you might assume that the reason you can pour a glass and drink it is simply that humans evolved long ago to handle milk. It's natural. It's what our bodies are for. Almost every part of that is wrong. And untangling it turns out to reveal something genuinely strange. Not just about milk, but about your own body and how recently it became what it is. Let's start with the part that breaks the story open. If you can drink a tall glass of milk with no trouble at all, you are, globally speaking, the weird one. Here's the thing, almost nobody is taught. Every healthy human baby can digest milk. Of course it can. Milk is its entire diet. In fact, that's the whole reason we have the tool for the job in the first place. A baby needs to digest the sugar in its mother's milk, so we're all born able to. We do it with an enzyme called lactase, which breaks that sugar down. But in most people on Earth, the body switches that enzyme off sometime after childhood. Once weaned, you were never meant to need it again. The result is that roughly 2/3 of the world's adults can't fully digest milk. For many of them, especially in larger amounts, milk can mean cramps, bloating, and digestive trouble, what we call being lactose intolerant. Only about 1/3 of adults worldwide keep that milk digesting enzyme switch on for life. And that minority is clustered in particular places, heavily in people of Northern European descent and in certain herding peoples of Africa and the Middle East. So the ability to drink milk as an adult isn't the normal human condition at all. It's the exception. If milk doesn't bother you, you're not the default human. You're the mutation, which raises the obvious question. Where did that exception come from? And when? To answer that, you have to go back to the moment milk first became something an adult human could even get hold of. Because for almost the entire human story, it wasn't. Think about it. To drink milk, you need a milk animal, a cow, a goat, a sheep, and standing still long enough to be milked day after day. Wild animals don't offer that, so milk only enters the human menu after we domesticated those animals, and that happened surprisingly recently. Somewhere around 10,000 years ago in the Near East as people first shifted from hunting and gathering to farming. And we can actually pin this down, which I love. Archaeologists have found the chemical traces of milk fat soaked into ancient broken pottery. The residue of dairy still detectable thousands of years later. Those traces show dairying in parts of Europe getting on for 8,000 years ago, and in Britain around 6,000 years ago. So on the scale of our species, milk is a newcomer. We have been recognizably human for a couple of 100,000 years. We've been drinking milk for maybe 10. On that scale, milk is a startlingly recent arrival. But here's where it gets really strange, and where the obvious story falls apart completely. You'd assume the order of events was humans evolved the gene to digest milk, and then, because they could, they started drinking it. Gene first, glass second. That's the version in a lot of textbooks. It's backwards. When scientists mapped out when people were actually consuming milk against when the milk digesting gene became common, they found an enormous gap between the two. People in Europe were using milk for thousands of years before the gene that lets adults digest it was widespread. By one major reconstruction, milk was being consumed thousands of years before that gene became common across the population, a gap of something like 4,000 years. Sit with that. For roughly 4,000 years, people were keeping dairy animals and using their milk, while most of them still couldn't properly digest it. How on earth do you do that? The answer is beautifully simple. You don't drink it straight, you turn it into cheese and yogurt. Both of those processes slash the amount of milk sugar. the very thing that causes the trouble, leaving something a lactose intolerant gut can handle far more comfortably. So, the first dairying peoples almost certainly weren't knocking back fresh milk. They were eating processed dairy that worked around a body that hadn't caught up yet. Culture solved the problem thousands of years before biology did, which leaves the deepest question of all. If they already had cheese and yogurt, if they'd already worked around the problem, then why did the gene to drink milk ever evolve at all? Why did being able to handle fresh milk become such a massive survival advantage that it spread like wildfire? And here I have to be straight with you. This is the part scientists are still genuinely arguing about. And the leading answer is recent and a little unsettling. For a long time, the assumption was the easy one. Milk is nutritious, so people who could drink more of it were better fed, had more children, and the gene spread. Simple. But a large study published in 2022 challenged that. The researchers argued that everyday nutrition wasn't a strong enough force to explain how violently fast this gene took over. Their proposed explanation instead points to two grimmer drivers: famine and disease. The logic goes like this. Normally, a lactose intolerant person who drinks milk just feels unwell. Unpleasant, not deadly. But put that same person in a famine, desperate, eating whatever's available, including milk, or in one of the crowded, dirty early settlements where diarrheal disease was rife, and the maths changes. Undigested milk sugar pulls water into the gut. Pair that with the disease that's already causing diarrhea, and researchers argue the dehydration risk could become far more serious, even deadly. In those brutal moments, they suggest being able to safely digest milk wasn't a luxury. It was a difference between living and dying. One of the researchers described it as a kind of turbocharged natural selection. I want to flag that clearly. This famine and disease idea is the current leading explanation, published recently, and it overturned the older nutrition story. It's the best answer we have right now, not the final word. The honest position is that we know the gene spread astonishingly fast, and we're still pinning down exactly why. One more thing worth knowing, because it shows how powerful the pressure was. This didn't happen just once. The ability to digest milk into adulthood evolved more than one time, separately, through different mutations in Europe and in herding peoples of East Africa. Different roads, same destination. Whenever humans leaned hard on dairy, evolution came knocking. So, when did humans start drinking milk? The honest answer is a lot more interesting than a single date. We started keeping milk animals around 10,000 years ago. We started eating dairy we could actually handle, cheese, yogurt soon after, but the ability to drink fresh milk as an adult? That came thousands of years later still, spread unevenly across the world, and most of humanity never got it at all. And that's the part that really stays with me. We tend to assume our bodies are neatly built for the lives we lead, that if we do something as ordinary as drinking milk, we must have been designed for it. But milk is a recent arrival. Most adults on the planet still can't properly digest it. And the ones who can are carrying a recent, accidental, hard-won rewrite of their own biology. One that, it seems, was paid for in famine and disease. You weren't built to drink milk, and if it feels perfectly natural to you, you're not looking at the ancient human condition at all. You're looking at one of evolution's most recent experiments, still running in you.